I saw Justice League over the weekend, and I have several things to say about it, but first I want to say a little bit of what it's about before I get into what I think of it. It takes place after the events of Dawn of Justice. Superman is dead, and Bruce Wayne and Diana Prince have teamed up to form a superhero team to fight the evil god Steppenwolf, who plans on turning the entire world into hell on earth. Now, there's a few different ways you can look at this movie. You can look at it as an individual film, you can look at it comparatively to other films in the DCEU, and you can look at it comparatively to other superhero films, most reasonably the ones of the Marvel Universe. As an individual, Justice League really doesn't work. It just doesn't. Too much of it is structured with things that were established in previous entries in the DCEU, and it would just confuse a lot of people, I think, who aren't at least familiar with what's in it. I'm not saying movies can't be great on their own and be a part of a franchise, but what I do believe is the best kinds of movies are ones that work on their own. One of the best examples of this, I think, is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. If you want a more modern example, I would say Dawn of the Planet of the Apes from 2014 or 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. Yeah, it's just way too confusing, I think, because for people who aren't at least familiar with the extended universe and other films that have came before Justice League. And if this is your first time watching a DCEU film, I would not recommend Justice League being the first one you watch, but that's just me. Now, what's probably the best way to look at Justice League is comparing it to other films in the DCEU. The two specific ones that I think are best to compare and contrast it to are Wonder Woman, a film that I really did like, and Suicide Squad, one that I really disliked. Something I notice in Justice League when I compare it to Wonder Woman is the difference of the character of Diana in Wonder Woman and the character of Diana in Justice League. And that difference is in Justice League, she's just so flat as a character. I think Gal Gadot is terrific as Wonder Woman. She gets the character so right. She has so much energy and charisma. But her character was much more well written in her own movie than she is here. And I think that same thing can be said for all the characters in the movie. They have backstories and personalities, but they don't have a whole lot of depth. Even the villain of Steppenwolf is very banal with his one dynamic of, I'm going to destroy the world. When I think of the best kinds of superhero films and what makes them so good is how deep they make the characters, how they flesh them out, show them as being superpowered but still very vulnerable. Justice League just never really gives us more than an ankle-deep look at its superhero team. However, compared to Suicide Squad, it is a huge improvement. The characters in Suicide Squad were even more so thinner written, and they were also very angular. They just didn't fit very well together in the same movie. The characters in Justice League have excellent chemistry. They all fit into place very well in their movie together. And I really liked the casting. I mentioned how much I liked Gal Gadot, but I also really liked Ezra Miller as Flash, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, Ray Fisher as Cyborg, and Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill, who, of course, both return for the roles of Batman and Superman, respectively. It's also much more coherent than Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad had a very messy, very convoluted plot that you couldn't have any fun with. Justice League is a lot more easier to follow, and I found that much more enjoyable to watch. Now, to get into the DC-Marvel rivalry, comparing it to, of course, the most obvious choice being the Avengers, it being also a superhero team film. It goes without saying Justice League is not as good as Avengers, not even close, in fact. Visually, the Avengers was much more polished and easier on the eyes. It was a lot cleaner looking. Justice League is kind of gaudy and almost gouging with special effects. Also, it was much more narratively defined and had a much smoother arc. Justice League just feels kind of flat and basic with its plot. So, did I like the movie? Well, here's a quick rundown of the things that I felt were its pros and cons. The cons were very serious flaws, I felt. The characters were not very deep. They felt very flat. The plot was very generic. Also, the special effects were not very good looking. They were almost an eyesore at times. But there are also a lot of good things I can say about the film. Like, it's very enjoyable. I always had fun watching it, and the cast has a very good chemistry together, and they're obviously having a lot of fun in their roles. So I do recommend Justice League. Absolutely, it's worth the money, and I enjoyed every bit of it. And it's a fun movie to have right now while the DC universe is still trying to find its footing. Thank you so much for watching. I'm planning more reviews soon. Not really sure when they'll come out, but I'm hoping to soon have reviews where instead of reviewing things that are in a theater, reviewing things that have came out recently on home release, on streaming, DVD, Netflix, Redbox. Until then, I'm Logan D. McCoy, and this is Real McCoy Reviews.
Oh, awesome. As a bat signal, that's your... Oh, sorry. That's your signal. That means we have to go now.
Yeah, that's what that means.